down the field. Happy tossing dimes, cup $1 million deal. Fantasy football, better know it's real. Tune into the podcast, tell us how you feel. We be going live, best believe we talk.
Javi, as we all know, that DFS is a huge game right now, blowing up everywhere. It has for the last few years. You and I both play it. We play it quite often. But the fact of the matter is, it's frustrating because have you or do you know anybody that's actually ever hit it big, like hit the big jackpots?
No. I think
exactly.
Gerald probably $100 or something. That's it.
Yeah, just something small like that. But it has been proven actually that 1.3% of all DFS players are professionals. And usually it's those professionals that are taking home 90% of those pots every single week. So,
losers.
Game's about to change.
Winners.
And I am proud to announce that we have partnered up with 247 Clash Daily Fantasy Sports Entertainment. Now, this is different. It's a DFS site that is a player versus player format based on fantasy points. Does that make sense to you right now?
Oh, yeah. That's the way I like it. That's the way I like it.
Yeah, we'll touch on the lines here shortly. You'll be given a certain number of lines to play, and the person with the most correct wins the pot. So pretty simple, like mostly I guess, guessing game pretty much. Keep in mind, there could be multiple winners, though. For example, last week, there was 2 winners that split the pot. They each got 11 of 13 correct. I played last week. I got 9 out of 13. So basically the difference is this. With this format, they're taking away the professionals' advantage, instead it's given everybody an equal chance basically to win. So you must be a Canadian resident to play. That's the only thing. So you Americans, tough titties, bro. Canadian residents only to play. So, like, for example, if you want to touch on this real quick, I'll go through. I'll give you an example of a line that's this week. The lines just came out today for this weekend. So, for example, one of the first ones here, we got Josh Allen versus Jacoby Brissett. Now, obviously, Josh Allen is favored by 12.5 fantasy points. Now, Habby, do you think Josh Allen is going to be, let's say 13 fantasy points better than Jacoby Brissett this week?
No. You know why? Because there's going to be 2 feet of snow on the ground in Buffalo. So
it's exactly why I actually pointed this one out right now. These lines will not change. So that's almost like a freebie for you guys. So talking to you right now about it, that's almost a freebie for you. So in that case, you're going to take Jacoby Brissett. Doesn't matter. Josh Allen does outscore in fantasy points. He's got to outscore him by 12.5 in order to win. So just something simple like that is all this is. So this week, I believe there's 13 different games. So I mean, jump on the site. I'll put the site in the show notes, the website in the show notes for you. When you do sign up, make sure you use the referral code NORTH. I repeat, use the referral code NORTH. Deposit a little bit of money and start playing with us like ASAP. It's very interesting. It's very interesting. Some of these lines are pretty out to lunch, but there's some that are really tricky. So make sure you read the rules, because there is a stipulation in there as well that if you want to actually box a game, which is basically the minimum bet right now to play in this pool is $5. If you box a game, which means you basically don't know who's going to win, you box it, means you win no matter what. That's going to double your bet to $10. So, and then further on and further, it can go up to about $80, I believe, in order for you to play. I play the $5 one the other day. Maybe if I did, do a couple more, box a couple games or something like that, I would have cashed in. So just something to take a look at. So once again, when you do sign up, make sure you use the referral code NORTH. And that is about it. Habby, nice. Let's jump into this Vote Slouch and Sneaky episode for week 11. I'm starting this off right now because I want to.
Okay, let's do it then.
I'm amped up right now, buddy. I'm ready to go.
I was ready. But go ahead.
All right. The guy I'm vouching for this week is my man, Danny Dimes, going up against Detroit. Currently, QB 16 through 10 weeks, is averaging over 16.5 fantasy points per game, which to me is surprising since really he's only thrown over 200 yards twice this year. Going into the matchup with the Lions, though, Jones is averaging almost 180 yards a game. Now, wondering how his fantasy stats are decent to good. is because of the fact his ability, he's extending plays with his legs, which we saw a little bit from last year. But this year, especially, he's doing it. He's averaging over 40 yards per game rushing and almost 8 carries a game. So now this is the week, however, that this is all going to come together for Jones in this Giants offense. The Lions are giving up over 23 points per game to opposing quarterbacks, and which is the worst in the league. So, and we've seen teams throw all over this Detroit team. We've seen teams run all over this Detroit team. So, in 2 of the last 3 weeks, opposing quarterbacks have scored more than 29 points, putting Jones in the smash spot this week. So you could fire Jones up this week, expect a top 10 finish as well.
Boom. And Detroit can score too. So that just leaves their opponents chucking it all game against them as well.
Oh, 100%, 100%. It should be a high scoring game. So do you got to vote? Who are you vouching for this week?
I'm vouching for Jimmy G. Looking for guys that you could use off the bye week. I think he's a good streaming option this week against the poopy Arizona pass defense, who allows over 20 fantasy points per game to QBs over the last month. I think Jimmy G, his floor is probably around 15, 16 points, but I think this week and is his ceiling. We're going to see his ceiling. I think he's going to get you 20 plus. Last time he played Arizona, he threw for 326 and two scores. So again, and their defense hasn't got much better since then. And I think this whole Niners offense is going to go off this week.
I hope so. I hope so, because I got some investment in a few of those players in a few leagues. So that would be nice. Yeah, I do like him as well. You know, with all these quarterbacks on buys this week, I do like Jimmy G as long as he kind of keeps the mistakes to a minimal. Yeah. I do also see a top 10 finish for him this week. So,
boom.
A guy that that's a slouch for me this week, and he is most weeks, but just especially this week, is going to be Ryan Tannehill at the Packers. Keep in mind, last week we did see Tannehill put up his best fantasy game of the season. She dropped almost, I think it was like 20 plus fantasy points against the Broncos, which is a good defensive team as well. But as usual, it's tough to trust him moving forward, especially with the Packers this week. Packers defense has been quite good, close to excellent against quarterbacks this year, only allowing 13 fantasy points per game through 10 weeks. So if you got to look somewhere else, I mean, I would be looking at a guy like Mariota instead of him, even maybe Baker Mayfield instead of Ryan Tannehill this week, which makes me want to puke in my mouth. But, you know, there is a few streamers out there that are a little bit better.
Yeah, they're in tough against Green Bay, and I could see maybe a little bit of a turnaround coming here for Green Bay. Second half of the season.
We'll see. We'll see. I'll believe that when it happens.
Rodgers has found his boy.
Anyway. I'm sure we're going to touch on him after too.
My slouch for the QB position is going to be Derek Carr this week. He's in a tough matchup against the Broncos, who've allowed the fewest fantasy points per game to QBs in the last month and the second fewest on the year. I would stay away from Carr this week. He's been up and down all year, more so down. He did throw 248 and 2 touchdowns against the Colts in week 10, getting you 17.9 fantasy points. It was a good game for him, but I don't think this week he's going to come close to that against the Denver Broncos. Their D is just too strong against that pass.
Yeah. I don't know what's going on with that Raiders team in general. They are not very good, though. But I would have to agree with you. I'm not a huge fan of Derek Carr this week at all. So,
bench him.
What's that?
Bench him.
Yeah, bench him for sure. Over to the running back position, I'm vouching, which a lot of people might think that this is crazy, but Isaiah Pacheco, I'm rolling with him against the Chargers. Chiefs finally, after weeks of having pretty much no run game, they finally decided to hand the reins over Pacheco in week 10. Played over 55% of the snaps, rushed for over 80 yards on 16 carries, 5.1 yards per carry. So we haven't seen that out of a Chiefs running back in probably about since last year. As for the past few games, like I mentioned, the Chiefs haven't had much of a run game. So this was just a much needed change for this offense in general that, balance out the attack a little bit more, right? It just can't be all about Mahomes in the passing game. You got to kind of throw that, get those running backs in there as well at the same time. So, and the fact if you got him this week, you're going to be starting him. Chiefs face Chargers team, who's probably, if not one of the worst defenses in the league against running backs, giving up over 27 points per game to the position. And not to mention, they've given up 25 plus fantasy points in every game this year, but one. Pretty good shot that they're giving up at least 25 points this week.
Yeah,
So,
they're gonna give Pacheco an opportunity to go wild this week, I think.
yeah, so like I said, fire him up this week. He's going to find the end zone and put up some good fantasy numbers as well.
And Clyde, apparently just 0 touches. He's done. Like they're not giving him the ball at all anymore.
Drop him. Get rid of him. Drop him.
Sack of hammers.
Who do you got?
All right, my vouch this week is going to be coming out of Washington. Brian Robinson. He went off for 86 yards and 1 touchdown last week. He was on for 52% of the snaps for 26 carries. Antonio Gibson played 48%. I think Robinson's a good bet in this game because Washington should be up for most of the game. And when the Commanders are playing with the lead and he can run downhill, I think this is going to be a Robinson game more so than Gibson. And Houston just can't stop running backs. It's a situation in which Commanders could easily be playing with the lead. Like I said, that means I think fire them up. I mean, Texans have allowed by far the most fantasy points to running backs this season at 32.4 per game. So, I mean, there's nothing but eating for Robinson this week here.
Yeah, the Texans, that's my team. They cannot stop the run at all. I mean, they have given up, like you mentioned, like over 30 points a game to most running backs.
And they allow the big plays. They allow the big plays. Almost every running back has scored or gotten loose for a big yardage.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm not going to argue that. I do like Gibson, however, also in this game as well, just for the fact is Gibson looked pretty good last week. You did mention that, it should get out of hand, but I don't think it is. This Texans is a very underrated team. That are slowly starting to kind of pick things up. They're not.
Washington's the ipso facto best team in the league right now.
What's that?
They're the ipso facto best team in the league right now. Just took down Philly.
It is. No, I agree. I just don't think that it's going to be a blowout like you're saying. So therefore, I'm saying you could probably fire up B-Rob as your RB2, but you could probably flex Gibson out, especially in PPR leagues. So my 2 cents, bro.
All right.
My slouch for the week is going to be none other than pretty much the guy that has no competition behind him is James Conner against the Niners. Had a good game last week, scored twice, but as far as his numbers go, it's the same as it is pretty much every week. They're not great. 29 rushes for 69 yards. But like I mentioned, he has nobody behind him now that they released Eno Benjamin, who is now a Houston Texan, if I might add. But as usual, like I mentioned, this is Conner's ammo, right? This is what he does. He's not big rushing numbers, but can find the end zone. Look at what he did last year, right? Put up 15 touchdowns last year, I believe. I think, however, Conner may be able to find the end zone again this week, but I'm not confident starting him because the Niners are one of the best run defenses in the league. They have gotten a little bit better over the last 2 games. They're only allowing 14 fantasy points per game. And although they have given up 8 rushing touchdowns this year, I'm still not confident running Conner out there. So chances are you can't bench him because of the guys that are on buys and because you probably drafted him to be your RB1/2. Just temper your expectations with him this week because if he doesn't find the end zone, you're going to be fairly disappointed.
Never been a huge fan of James Conner myself. I don't think I've ever had him on any of my fantasy teams.
I did. I dealt him this year, so I'm not too disappointed about it. So who you got? Who you set this week?
All right. My slouch is DeAndre Swift this week. Yeah, it's a tough call, but even after Dan Campbell said that they were going to get Swift more work before last week, they did not, because he played fewer than 20 snaps for a second straight game. In total, he played 31% of the snaps, finishing with 12 yards and 1 touchdown on 6 carries and 3 targets. He played the same number of snaps and had the same number of targets as Justin Jackson, which is a little bit pathetic, let's say, because he's their third running back, I believe. The Lions are now bringing a third running back into the equation, like I said, and Swift finished 4th on his team in rushing yards behind the 2 other running backs and Jared Goff. And he's going up against a tough defense in the New York Giants, who allowed the 7th fewest fantasy points per game to backs this season with 19.4. I think there's too much potential with Swift to actually drop him, but I'd keep him on your bench right now if you have another option, because he's just not getting the production.
Yeah, I wouldn't even be counting on Jamal Williams this week neither, or like that backfield in general, because like you mentioned, the Giants, 7th fewest fantasy points to runners since week 7 this year. They've only actually allowed 3 rushing touchdowns, so we're nose to Jamal Williams, putting up numbers by getting in the end zone. This week, I think, there's a good chance it doesn't happen. So I do like that call, Habby.
Boom.
Over to the wide receiver position. I'm vouching for, we saw him go off on Monday night. We're going to see him go off again. Well, hopefully maybe not as much, but volume is king, as they say. So Terry McLaurin, coming off huge game, season highs in targets, receptions, and yards, 8 for 128 on 11 targets. Seemed like he was the man for Taylor Heineke this past week. He's 4 straight games with at least 8 targets. He's finished with 10 plus fantasy points in PPR during that time. And even though, the Texans have been fairly decent against wide receivers, they're only allowing about 17 fantasy points per game. Like I mentioned, volume is king, and Scary Terry should continue to see double-digit targets in this matchup. So I am not shying away from this defense. I'm firing Terry up with confidence this week.
And since we've seen Heineke come in, Scary Terry's been getting the grabs. And even last year when Heineke was in there, we saw Terry, his best production came with Heineke.
Heineke's playing for a job right now. Right now, he's technically the face of this franchise. I mean, they're using his face all over billboards and everything like that. So he's technically playing for a job, and I think he knows how do they say that? Where his bread is buttered. Would that be a good saying for Scary Terry? Yeah. So he's pretty smart guy. So who do you got? Who are you vouching for? Sorry about that.
I'm gonna vouch for a man we talked about earlier, Christian Watson here. Watson exploded in week 10 with 3 touchdowns against the Cowboys. Obviously, we've known that Rodgers has been looking for somebody to be a consistent pass catcher in that offense. We saw Watson hauled in 4 catches for 104 yards, finishing with just under 33 fantasy points. His 8 targets gave him a team-high 42% target share, and he also posted a 75% air yard share. So, I mean, we know that Rodgers is one of the most accurate deep ball throwers in the league, and I think that this combination between him and Watson could be good going forward. I see Watson as a little bit of a boom and bust player week to week because he's relying so heavily on those deep balls. But this week against Tennessee, he's got a good matchup, and I think that we could see another good game against the Titan, who have allowed the 4th most fantasy points per game to wide receivers this season at 38.5. And the Titans have also particularly struggled against deep passes to receivers on the season. They've allowed 18 pass completions of 20 plus air yards to receiver, as well as 748 yards. So, I mean, that's just a recipe for these two to have another good game again, Rodgers and Watson.
Yeah, I know. I mentioned this on our waiver wire show as well. Once Rogers locks in on somebody and trusts somebody, he can't really do anything wrong, right?
Oh,
That's
yeah.
what we've seen.
We've seen it with Adams, almost too much.
Yeah, we're not going to see a big production game like he had. No 3 touchdown game this week, but I do see.
We may.
No.
If they can't stop Rogers' deep ball, he's just going to keep chucking it.
I do see Watson performing well. Like, I definitely think he is startable. And I just don't think we won't see a 3 touchdown performance. I think he does get in the end zone. I think there's a good chance he gets back in the end zone. But like I said, trusting by Rodgers, you're going to get fed. So that's where
Titans suck against the deep ball. Suck.
Yep. All right, Habby. I get it. Keep track of any of these guys. If we actually hit on any of these guys, I'm going to do it this week. For sure.
I mean, I do in my head, but
yeah,
I don't write it
down. My slouch this week is going to be Michael Pittman Jr. Indianapolis going up against Philly. Clearly, there's no doubt that Matt Ryan is the much better upgrade over what was his name? Sam Ehlinger?
Yeah. Ehlinger.
Yeah. And I mean, it should help get Pittman rolling again. However, I don't think it's going to be a week that's going to happen against an Eagles defense that's held opposing wide receivers under 22 fantasy points in 3 of their last 4 games. And the fact is that, I mean, even though Pittman has averaged almost 12 fantasy points per game over the last 4 weeks, it's not going to continue this week. Mix in the fact that Pittman will not only draw the attention from, basically from the top corners, but Paris Campbell, who is dominating the last 3 weeks or last 3 games with Matt Ryan. I talked about that on the podcast. He's going to take some of those looks away from Pittman. So I don't know if you have somebody that's a better matchup. I mean, I would look there instead of leaning on Pittman this week. Even though we saw Scary Terry destroy them last week, but I think that's not going to happen this week.
Nope, I agree. Until we see Pittman and Ryan do some magic together, I keep him on my bench too.
Perfect.
Although this week you're probably going to have to start him because of the buys.
Yeah, who are you sitting?
I'm going to sit another guy in that game, Devontae Smith. Smith finished week 10 with a team high 8 targets, turning them into 6 catches for 39 yards and a touchdown. The touchdown is nice, but it really salvaged his day because his yak yards were terrible. He's been up and down this season, target wise, and I mean PPR, it's good numbers. And this is shaping up to be a match where the Eagles might not have to throw too much. Even though they do, there is no guarantee of success. The Colts have allowed the fewest fantasy points per game to receivers this season at 24.1 per game. It actually drops 20.9 per game in the last month. So their defense against the pass is pretty good. I could see the Hurts and Sanders going off on the ground this week against Indy and getting most of those fantasy points for you in that offense. And yeah, that's what I have to say about Devontae Smith. So, I mean, I don't think he's going to have a great game this week.
I disagree with that only for the simple fact we saw Goddard go onto IR. And when Goddard did go down, we did see not only Goddard go down on IR, but we also saw A.J. Brown banged up. So I think with those two in general, I still think Hurts is going to toss the ball. I do think that Devonta Smith is going to be going to be that guy this week.
They're behind last week. They didn't know what the hell to do. You're throwing in Devontae Smith, and he can't even take 2 steps with the ball. He's getting knocked over right as soon as he catches it.
I will bet you he gets in the end zone this week and puts up double-digit fantasy points.
Oh, really?
I do.
Okay.
I don't know what we're going to bet, but whatever. A friendly wager, Habby. A friendly wager.
Farmer's bet.
Okay, so I disagree with you. So let's carry on to our.
Well, you're wrong. You're wrong.
Let's go to the tight end position. Guy that I'm vouching for this week, Juwan Johnson, tight end for the Saints. Probably a weird call because
He's been
Johnson
good.
most likely a streamer, yeah. And even this week against the Rams, who has only given up, I think, like 6 fantasy points to the position during weeks throughout the season, but during weeks 8 and 9, they gave up 15 plus points to the position last week. Not really counting last week's performance because Ertz did go down early, so I'm not really putting that game into effect, but to count those toward those stats. So, but Johnson has been awesome over the last 3 weeks. 4 touchdowns and averaging over 30 yards a game. Johnson's going to get you another 10 plus fantasy points this week. And I think he's going to be awesome for anybody that starts, especially for a guy that most people got off the wire that are streaming this week.
Is Winston starting this week? Do you know?
No, Dalton was announced.
Dalton again. Okay. I think as long as Dalton starts, it's a safe bet with Juwan.
They have nobody to throw the ball to. I think even when Winston comes back, I'm not sure where they're going to go, but as of right now, like you're right. I mean, that's where he's been performing with Dalton. So yeah, I guess we'll have to revisit this conversation when Winston gets back there, if he gets back there.
Everybody's got their guys. The guy I'm going to talk about was a ghost when Cooper Rush was at quarterback. A ghost, Dalton Schultz. He's my vouch this week. And when Dak Prescott comes in, it's a totally different beast with Dalton Schultz. The reason he was drafted high was because of his production with Dak Prescott. Really, I would ignore everything he did with Cooper Rush because it was pretty much nothing. Schultz scored 17.4 fantasy points in week 10. And Schultz has averaged 12.2 fantasy points per game with Prescott. So scoring more than 13 in 3 of the 4 games. His low game with Prescott is 9.9 fantasy points, which for a tight end, that's pretty good. That's still pretty good. And I think that this matchup against the Vikings is good. They're just outside the top 10 in fantasy points allowed to tight ends, both on the year and in the last month. This is also the potential to be a high-scoring matchup with these two offenses chucking the ball a lot. And like I said, with Dak Prescott in there, Dalton Schultz is a top 5 tight end.
Yeah, they're giving up. I think the Vikings are giving up the 8th most points per game. So I do like that call. And Prescott loves him. Loves him. So moving forward, I mean, he's a must start every single week, in my opinion. So
I got a couple guys trying to get him out of me in keeper.
I was one of them.
Yeah, you. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Trev offered me a deal too.
Yeah, it was nice to see. I helped you out this week. You haven't even thanked me
for what? You beat Trev.
Top spot in Dynasty.
Yeah, you beat Trev. Thanks, buddy.
You're welcome. Had a good week. Thank you, Mr. Christian Watson.
Yeah,
but my tight end slouch for the week is going to be. I mean, it's expected. Kyle Pitts. Shouldn't shock anyone really to see him on this list. He's like others. Like when he was drafted, I expected huge things out of him. We didn't even see any of that last year. Going into this year, I'm like, okay, we're going to see stuff. So I think we saw two games out of 10 this year. We've seen him go off. The Falcons go up against the Bears this week, and they're among the league's best defenses against opposing tight ends. They're allowing on average, I think it's like 5 points per game. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm going to try my best. I'm not starting him this week. If anything, I'm going to try to, trade him. I'll try to find somebody that will buy into his monster week 8 game that he had against the Panthers when he put up almost 20. Outside of that, he's going to stay far down my on my bench for weeks to come until, however, Desmond Ridder comes into the game. Then I think it might be a different change of the game.
Oh, really? You think Ridder is going to find him a little more often?
He throws the ball further, man. He's got a rocket of an arm. I think Pitts is going to be able to. Oh, Pitts is going to crush when Ridder gets in there. Mark my word.
Oh, I can't wait.
Mariota sucks.
Yeah, he does. Oh,
Who are you sitting? Who are you sitting this week?
Well, along with most of the receiving players in this Buffalo-Cleveland game, I'm going to sit Dawson Knox Knox is only one game this year with 10 fantasy points, with more than 10 fantasy points. He is averaging just 4 targets, 3 catches, and 30 yards per game this season. He was drafted as a top 10 tight end, but he's well below that. Plus, he faces the Browns, who have allowed the 5th fewest fantasy points per game to tight ends this season. And with it being a good week to get tight ends off the waiver wire, I think, try to get away from Knox this week because the weather is going to be terrible. And even in good weather, he has been poop.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I don't think there's not really much out there left for him after what Allen does with his receivers anyways. But yeah, like you mentioned, I think it's going to be more of a run game this week. So you're definitely, I'm definitely sitting Knox this week. So that takes care of our vouchers and slouches for the week. I got just a couple guys real quick that are going to be my sneaky starts. These are guys that are going to be ranked outside the top, 45. These guys, I believe, are both outside the top 50 this week. So first one I got here is Nico Collins of the Texans, coming off a great game where he saw double-digit targets last week, scored. Also led all receivers in snaps at 78%, and he ended the day 5 of 10 for 5 catches for almost 60 yards and a score on 10 targets. So that was huge. Favorable matchup this week against the Commanders, and although they have improved, they're still allowing a ton of touchdowns to the position through recent weeks. So Collins is a sneaky start considering Cook's most likely is going to be taken out of the game by the Commanders' corners. So you can flex him out. The other one I want to talk about super quick is Kendall Hinton of the Broncos facing the Raiders. Judy's banged up, no Hamler, 4 for 62 last week on 5 targets, played almost every single snap. I think you're going to see a little bit more out of Hinton. So if you're in a pinch, don't be afraid to go flex Kendall Hinton out if you've ever heard of him.
Whoo! That's a deep one.
Yeah. I think he's probably ranked like 70 or 75th this week. So, but yeah. So, Habby, you got any guys, or did I take care of that portion of our episode?
You have one guy who had a good week last week, Gerald Everett. He's going up against Arizona. Everett, he's coming off a game where he was Seattle's lone bright spot during a pretty bad offensive performance. I think that this matchup against Arizona looks pretty good for him, and I think that he's going to continue his play from last week. So fire up in Everett if you got him.
If he's healthy. I mean, he did leave last week banged up, but there's nothing stating that it seems like it's going to be lingering this week and he's to miss time yet. But I do agree. If he does play, you can pretty much fire up any of these receivers. Someone has to catch the ball from Herbert, so I would agree with that. But all right, Happy. Like I mentioned before, 247 Clash. I will be posting their website with the referral code in our show notes. Please head over there, guys. Check it out. Like I said, I love it. I love the fact that it, gives everyday guys like you and I a chance to win some money on a small bet. You don't have any of these professionals taking over from that point. So outside of that, Habby, awesome episode, man. Pumped for it. And we will talk to you this week. Peace.
Peace.